to this amazing guest we have today. Deepika, thank you so much for coming. So Deepika is an art correspondent, a journalist, a TV show producer, and she recently became an author because she just published The Red Helmet, her first book, that it took her 9 months to write, and 23 years to actually create the concept and the background and do research. That's an amazing book. I read it. Thank you so much, Deepika. Actually, Deepika gave me the book during the dinner that we had together, and it was my present from that dinner, so I'm very happy that I had it. And I know for a fact that you decided actually to do your own marketing for the Red Helmet.
Yep.
Is there like any story behind that? Why we decided to do it your own way?
I think the entire book, Yana, has been a complete story from the entire act of writing it, which was a huge struggle. I think I've been a journalist all my life, and as a journalist, you've been out there so much that there is this struggle of, can you actually write a book, because you're going to put so much of yourself out there. A lot of my journalism is very pure reportage, and this kind of
opinion.
Unless I'm doing a commentary, which is rare, but it's very balanced, it's very objective, it's as many sides of the story. And I was completely drawn to a very personal story in my life. I'm a child of 1980s India, which was a very different India from the kind of India that we see now. We had the backdrop of a riot, which devastated so many lives. I mean, things just changed overnight. In 1981, I lost my mother. In 1984, we had a major riot in India. And it was almost like so many lives just completely fell apart. And I follow a lot of Indian writing in English. And I felt that while we've dealt with the partition of India very well, and while we deal with contemporary India really well, there are not so many books that go into 1980s India. This was the time before the media became as liberalized as it is now. And I wanted to sort of take the whole premise of, what if you lost everything in your life? Would you have it in you to fall in love again? Would you be able to take that risk again? So I use that as the main sort of premise, or if you want to call it plot, or whatever else that is. And when people go into the book, it opens with a lot of humor, and people are expecting a completely light-hearted fluff book.
But it is not.
I think it's a very dark book. You've read it, and it takes on loss with an enormous sense of dignity. I think every one of us, if we were to look around, even people who are here in a room, we've dealt with loss at some level, and we don't address it as much. I also felt, as a journalist, looking at so much of what is happening in social media, we've moved into this candy floss universe. Our lives are kind of determined by the number of likes we get for a visual we put out there. If our profile shot is not getting 50 likes or something, there's almost this sense of something is going wrong with our lives. I wanted to go into all these, sort of distance myself from the world I'm in now, and go back to an India of that time. And I think deal with the themes that I was taking on with a lot of humor. So it was a very difficult book to write.
Why was that? Why was it a difficult book to write?
It's also very personal.
Okay.
I'm asked a lot about whether it is entirely my life. It is
I
not,
wanted to ask that.
It isn't entirely my life, but it draws hugely on my life. And marked as it is by the enormous sense of loss that I have faced. And I think I've kind of never recovered from my mother's death. She died of breast cancer. And to then soon after that see what happened, with the riots, and going to college with full security, going to university at a time when you had to be home by 6 o'clock and living with a very authoritarian grandmother. And
Must
all
be tough for you.
It was, but I think people have tougher lives. I just wanted to go back to that period in time. So initially when I started writing the novel, there was a bit of interest, but when it was done, nobody really wanted to publish it. So I sat for almost a year with a manuscript that I used to then call my stillborn child, because when you finish a book and no one wants to put it out there, there's just this, you wake up every morning and you think that I spent so much time writing this and now no one is interested in this story. But I eventually did find a publisher. what happened then was my publisher, this was their first fiction title. So I became what in market terms is called a first-time single title author.
Okay.
And that's where the whole question about marketing came in, because 2,300 copies of this book sailed into Singapore in October. And I started knocking on people's doors saying, would you want to distribute this book for me? And everybody would say, oh, it's a single title account and, we don't want to open a new account with you. And I was just so frustrated. I had books like stacked everywhere in my bedroom. If you went to my kids' room, and every morning when I woke up, I would look at these boxes of books and I would think, I'm going to die with this book. And then one morning I woke up and I said, you know what? I'm really active on social media. I've almost developed a voice that is very different from the voice that you read in print. Why don't I just get onto social media and market this book on my own? So I gave myself 90 days and I said, I am so selling this book. I think you have to take that passion and that conviction that I completely believe in this. Like you completely believe in the show that you're creating. And one day it's just going to surprise you because it's your faith that is going to keep you alive. The book almost happened by accident. I
love it.
I finished editing a novel, and because I'd finished editing this novel and I was awake at night, I had all these empty spaces and I didn't know what to do with them. And one day I just wrote a note on Facebook, which is the FAQs. And I imagined I was a really famous author who's gone to a television show, which I used to produce at that time.
Okay.
And this FAQ kind of went viral. And I got a call from a friend who's a literary agent who said, where's the rest of the book? And I'm like, what rest of the book? And she said, that book you've talked about and that note you've written. And I said, no, there's no rest of the book. And she said, but this is a good time to write the rest of the book.
It must be really difficult to lose mom at a young age.
Very.
Yeah. So how did you dealt with that? I mean, because and the reason why I'm asking, because we do those shows here not only to talk about people's stories and to show that we're all humans, because there's always a human being behind success.
Yeah.
Right. So it's important to understand that success is not something you just wake up one day and you have it, but it's a journey you go towards to. And it takes a lot to deal with difficult situations in life. So, when you lose somebody you love, and particularly if it's a parent at such a young age, it affects you.
Yeah, emotionally.
It leaves an imprint on you as a person. And as a, and it's also the kind of woman that you're growing up to be. So what was your journey after that?
Very difficult, but I don't think I'm alone in having a difficult journey. I think the beauty of life has been, for all the difficulty, I'm not cynical. I still believe in the goodness of people. I think I've been privileged to find myself in Singapore. I've had a wonderful 20 years almost living in this fascinating country. My children are born here. And I think it is important not to become bitter with whatever happens in your life. And that would be the point where you would sort of completely break down if you stop believing in the many things that can probably shape and define you. I've always been open to the possibility of life. Sometimes people tell me, where do you get your energy from? And I said, I just completely live my life. From the time I wake up to the time I sleep, it's almost about what I'm going to do next, or the next story that I'm going to experience. I've always wanted to be a journalist. So in that, I think I've been able to walk my path. I'm interested in people's stories, just as you are in mine. I want to meet as many people as possible. I like that part about my life. And every morning when I wake up, I'm always thinking of what is the next story. And that has really kept me alive. You never recover from loss, whatever it is. For me, it's my mother's death is really a huge point in my life. And I think our lives just turned upside down. And you never ever recover from it. I sometimes sit on my balcony and I weep for no particular reason, and people sort of don't put that picture together, because the only picture I put out ever is I'm always smiling. I'm often asked, has writing The Red Helmet been closure for me?
I just wanted to ask that, actually. Has it been the closure for you or not?
No, it's not. But it has allowed me to address a lot of things that I had never openly addressed as a person. It's not something I put in a newspaper column, but it has allowed me to put a whole lot of that out there. it's not closure, but I think I am telling a lot of people that it is okay to talk about these things, that people get depressed, that people brood, that people talk about loss forever, and it is really perfectly all right, and that our world doesn't have to look perfect all the time.
How does it feel to put up yourself into the book? I mean, your entire story, to put it into the book and to kind of read the whole world, I mean, to allow the whole world to look into your soul and your heart. You know, how do you deal with public vulnerability? Because I know for many people it's a huge topic.
It is. The job of the writer then goes a step further. The job of the writer, or anybody who is in the creative industry, whether it's acting or it's dancing or directing or music, I think it's to get you to reflect on what is life. Like when we look at art, say I'm looking at a painting in your house, it's almost like I want to meditate. Why are we putting art in our homes, or why do we even have museums? It's to go through that process of meditation. And I think the job of the writer is actually a much deeper one. It's more intense. It's to talk about themes that maybe people don't want to talk about often. And if you don't have the ability to do that, I think why even try and write? And fragility and vulnerability are a huge part of our lives. We don't address it as openly as we do. You know, maybe in my grandmother's time, you had a close circle of friends, and you sort of, maybe they sat together and they talked about all of these things. But look at what our lives have become. It's like a perfect tea party in a 5-star hotel, and those are the only pictures that get out. You know, it's a bit tragic sometimes that everything feels so perfect.
For you, it's a lot about meaning, because you know it's the book is about meaning, and that's what you're doing with the saris. It's about meaning, and so do you believe in the meaning of life?
I do.
Okay.
I think it has to have some kind of purpose.
Okay. Have you figured out yours more or less along the way?
I haven't. Maybe I want to just make people happy, or make people, or maybe get people to talk about things that they don't usually talk about. And that is what the book allows me to do a little more than journalism. You know, journalism is more formal. Say if we are having this conversation, I'd be very formal with you. Whereas when I go in as, it's got a structure and you present yourself a certain way. But when I go in with my book, I'm an emotional person. You know, I'm the girl who takes on issues and who addresses these issues, who has a completely strong voice. But it allows me to do all of that. And when I speak to different groups of people, I can get them to talk about so many issues. I have people writing to me about all kinds of stories.
Like, what do you think? What people should be talking about that they're not talking right now in the society?
I can't say what they should be talking about, but I think sometimes if you're unhappy, maybe you should just address it instead of pretending to be happy all the time. It's not important, I think. It's okay to say I'm really very sad today and I'm having a completely lousy day, and it's okay to be real about that. And it's okay to sometimes put your selfie with low makeup.
If there were like one message, like in 1 or 2 sentences, that you would say that you really would like people to understand, so what would that be?
To never give up on anything, whatever happens in your life, to just keep believing, to have the conviction to say, I'm going to stand up again and I'm going to make this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepika. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And that was Deepika Shetty with us today, who is, as you can see, an absolutely gorgeous, amazing woman, a writer, who has enough courage and strength to stand up for her truth, to show to her own vulnerability, and empowering other women around her to do the same. And as you can see, her message is never give up and always stand up for yourself.
I love to bring happiness in people's lives. So if I see smiling faces, if I see the praise, if I see happiness, and when I'm able to create the celebrations of life, and I see that people do enjoy what I give them for the night or for the particular day, I'm very happy. It's a success to me.